So I could sort of deal with that sort of thing. But at the same time, I was frustrated. And I got the film finished somehow, but it wasn't finished to the level that I'd want it to be finished. And there's a saying that films aren't well, I guess there's a saying among directors that a film is never finished, it's just abandoned. And for other directors, it's the film is never finished, they just finally take it away from you at some point. But no matter how the story goes, the director is usually left frustrated and not feeling he's been able to complete his vision, or it's been altered one way or another. And so later on, I had the opportunity when we were thinking about reissuing the films for the 20th anniversary of Star Wars, of fixing them up. And I said, well, this is a great chance for me to experiment with a new technology and see if I can do the prequels, and at the same time fix a lot of things that I was really frustrated with the first time around with Star Wars that I couldn't complete properly because I either didn't have enough time, money, or technology to do it with. And so that was a great experience for me. So the final version, now the DVD version of the films, when they finally get out there, will have all of the nuances that I had been looking for when I first did the films.
Greetings once again, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to your special Star Wars Podcasting Day bonus show. Thank you all so much for being here and being supporters of the entire Star Wars podcasting universe that exists out there. We would not be here without all of your support, and so we are happy to once again be to be a contributor to Star Wars Podcasting Day. And this is your 2022 Podcasting Day bonus episode. And we're going to talk about the 25th anniversary of the Star Wars Special Editions. We're going to get into it. We have a special conversation lined up, kind of talking about our thoughts and feelings, our connection to the Special Editions when we saw them, and what we think works, what we think doesn't. It should be a fun conversation. And if all goes well, you will hear me once again, just like last year's Podcast Day show, with my brother Mark, who is the person who has watched Star Wars with me the most in my life. So it'll be a good time to talk about Star Wars with him once again, and to have him come and join the show one more time. I want to give a special, well, that's not really a special shout out to anything. I just want to remind everybody, if you're a new listener, you can find us on social media. We're at Mando_Vision, Twitter and Instagram. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure you are liking, subscribing, sharing the show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert. So yeah, welcome aboard. You heard what we used at the opening of the show. We had a sound clip from the creator himself, from George Lucas, on sort of what drove him, what motivated him to do the special editions, to kind of be able to go back in and kind of get the things he wished he could have done in 1977, and to also sort of test technology for the prequels. And I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more into that in our conversation. But one of the things I wanted to do with you all is I like to think that we are a Star Wars podcast that welcomes all sorts of different ideas and thoughts and opinions to the conversation. And it's hard to talk about the original trilogy without taking into consideration the input of Gary Kurtz, who was Lucas's producer on Episode 4 and Episode 5. Gary left for Return of the Jedi. He did not stay on board, other than maybe some initial pre-production stuff, because George wanted to change the script in ways that he didn't agree with. So Gary Kurtz left Return of the Jedi, so he didn't see through the original trilogy. But he was there for a lot of the really important moments of kind of shaping the original Star Wars trilogy, especially the first two films. So back in 2015, he was interviewed, and this was a few years, I think, before he ended up passing away. And he kind of talked about the special editions. And if you know a little bit of the history between George and Gary, while I wouldn't say it's in a relationship full of like animosity, they are creatively different. They are kind of creatively opposed. And so I wanted to present what Gary thinks about the special editions when he had the opportunity to view them. This does run for a couple minutes. I want to say 2, maybe 2.5 minutes long, maybe a little bit longer than that. But go ahead and listen to Gary talk about the special editions, and then we'll come back here before we get into the show proper, okay?
There were a lot of things we couldn't do in 1977 that he could do later, but I think that the problem is probably more fundamental than that a film is a product of its time and conditions. All of the conditions that we had in 1977, the constraints of money, the constraints of time, and everything else, created that original film, and it was released in that format. I'm not a big fan of changing films after they're released. I know it's very common practice now, especially with DVD releases, to make the film a lot longer, add a lot of things in that couldn't be in the theatrical release, or change things. I think all of those are a mistake. Maybe on the DVD it doesn't make any difference, but for a theatrical release, I think you have to let it go. Jean Renoir said at one time that he learned from his father that the sign of a good artist is knowing when you're done. You don't want to damage the work by continuing to work on it beyond the point in which it's good. And knowing when that is difficult sometimes. So I don't like the tinkering process. I think it's a mistake. It's okay if films don't have everything that you wanted to put in them. I think the annoying thing about some of the Star Wars stuff is that some of the things are in there are too much. I think if at the time we had had the capacity and the technology to be able to do some of those things, it would have been more than was in the original, but a lot less than was in the special editions. So that's a creative judgment based on kind of the moment. But the scene I object to the most is probably the Jabba the Hutt scene, because we had technical difficulty shooting that scene originally, and that character was going to be a human being. And we shot it 3 different times, and we had camera problems and other damage to the negative and things, so we abandoned it. But in that process, we put all the information in that scene into the Greedo scene in the cantina. So if you listen carefully, you'll hear that the dialogue is essentially the same. The story material that you get in that scene is what you get in the Greedo scene. So from a dramatic point of view, the scene is totally unnecessary. And the finished film is better without it, I think. Also, because Jabba is this giant slug rather than a human being, the sight lines are a bit odd. The position of the characters, if that had been the way the original scene was going to be shot, it would have been shot differently. So there are lots of problems with that scene. I just don't like it. I wince every time I've seen it. So it's just a good example of a film not needing it because we made an adjustment to allow for not using it by putting the material somewhere else. So I'm not a fan of the fixes unless they're just odd things. Adding a few more spaceships into the attack on the Death Star doesn't affect the story in any way. Or in Empire, cutting some holes in the walls of the set and showing windows out so you can see part of the Cloud City. Fine, those kind of things are perfectly acceptable in that process. Or having an extra shot of the Millennium Falcon landing or taking off because we have the time to do it now. Those don't interfere with the story structure, but some of the stuff, especially in Star Wars, did seem to interfere with a bit of the story.
So that's Gary Kurtz right there. Like I said, one of the architects that kind of helped shape Star Wars: A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back to the versions that we saw. And there was an episode when Gary passed away where I sort of talked a bit more about what he brought to the entire production. So I don't want to go into that too much. We may talk about that in our conversation here on the other side. But again, I wanted to present that piece of that interview to kind of show the contrast to Lucas's approach to the special editions, where he feels like it's a-okay to keep tinkering, and Kurtz is very much like, no, it's good right now. Stop. So again, if you know Gary and George's relationship, that's pretty on brand for both of them. But again, I suspect we will talk about that in the conversation. So let's go ahead and get into our conversation. Again, this is our special Star Wars Day bonus episode, so we're doing things a little bit differently today. And for our bumper, we're gonna go ahead and just play the trailer for the special edition that came out. I guess it must have been in '96 when this trailer first dropped, and the next thing that dropped was my jaw onto the floor when I saw it after we downloaded it. I think we had like a 56K modem at the time, so it took a hot minute to get that thing downloaded, but we did eventually, and then we rejoiced. So it's that time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
For an entire generation, people have experienced Star Wars the only way it's been possible, on the TV screen. But if you've only seen it this way, you haven't seen it at all. Now, for its 20th anniversary, the adventure of a lifetime returns to the big screen in a way you've never seen before.
There'll be no one to stop us this time.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
With newly enhanced visual effects,
They're coming in too fast!
THX and digital sound, and a few new surprises.
Hanabuki Bardonyanda.
On President's Day weekend, 1997,
Good luck.
George Lucas and 20th Century Fox invite you to welcome back Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Chewbacca, C-3PO, and R2-D2. Finally, the motion picture event, the way it was meant to be experienced.
This will be a day long remembered.
As the entire Star Wars trilogy returns on February 14th, Star Wars, followed soon after by The Empire Strikes Back, and then Return of the Jedi.
Move closer!
For a whole new generation who have yet to experience it on the big screen. And for everyone else to experience it again.
That boy is our last hope.
No, there is another.
The Star Wars Trilogy, Special Edition. See it again for the first time.
The Force will be with you, always.
Hey, all right, joining us all the way from Los Angeles, California, a mere, 2.5, 3 hours up the road from me. My brother Mark is here, the only other person, well, I guess the only person who's watched Star Wars probably as many times as I have. I mean, you watched the vast majority of my life. We watched it together. That's exciting. In distant second place is our good friend Reagan, but it's a very distant second place. So my brother Mark, how are you doing? Welcome aboard, sir.
Howdy.
Howdy. Only your second appearance on Mandivision, but you are a podcast veteran. You've been on the Tomcast podcast many a time, and at least once on the Come On It's So Good podcast, if that memory serves.
Yes.
Well, we are here. I love it. I love it.
Did you want me to elaborate?
No, you're fine. Don't worry. We are here because we are sort of commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Star Wars special editions this year. Obviously, I believe it was January, President's Day weekend, if memory serves, when Star Wars A New Hope, Episode 4 was re-released as a special edition. And then, I don't remember the exact dates, but, roughly 4 to 6 weeks later was Empire Strikes Back, followed by Return of the Jedi, back in theaters with updated effects and sounds and all kinds of extra things. And I'm sort of wondering, I'm hoping you can take me back 25 years ago, because I don't remember if you and I saw these together in a theater or not. Do you?
I think we saw the first one together.
Okay. Because I sort of have I have a memory of the first, of seeing A New Hope special edition. I saw it twice in one day. And I think I saw it the first time alone. Like, I went to a morning show by myself or something. And then in the evening, a bunch of us went together, if memory serves.
I think you went to that morning show with me.
Oh, okay. All right.
And you just don't remember.
All right. I know I went to, dude, it's 25 years ago. Yeah, I remember seeing it, like I said, twice in one day. Yeah, you and I seeing it in the morning makes a ton of sense, though. So that does make sense. And this was the first time for both you and I to see Star Wars Episode 4 in theaters. So
yes.
This is pretty exciting, right?
Yeah.
We came into the trilogy. The first time we saw a Star Wars in theaters was 1983, when we saw Return of the Jedi back in Wheaton Plaza back in the day.
That's what I've heard.
You were young, that's for sure.
Yes.
So to get to see Star Wars, we were really excited. We played the clip of the audio of the trailer that they released in '96, and I don't know, what was sort of your recollections of the cinema experience, seeing this for the first time with these updated effects? I mean, because you and I grew up on the VHSs, TV screenings on ABC or whatever network, and then just repeated viewings on VHS over and over again, wearing out that cassette tape. So what was your sort of impression checking this out for the first time in theaters?
I thought it was great. I had a blast with it. It was a lot of fun. I saw each one in theaters multiple times. I thought it was great.
I wholeheartedly agree. Some of the changes were interesting, I guess is the best way. There's only one that I really butted up against, but it was so exciting to get to see the trilogy back in theaters again for the first time. And, I shared that interview with you that George Lucas did, where he was, he sort of admits that, he wanted to put these out there for a new generation, but he also wanted to kind of test the technology as he was kind of gearing up to get the prequels going.
Right.
So it was sort of a good test run on things like that. I just remember being so excited that we were going to get to see Star Wars in a theater, because like that trailer says, I mean, we were used to watching it on the small, tiny TVs.
Yeah.
And we were about to go to a cinema, widescreen format, THX sound, updated. The sound effects being updated is probably one of my favorite improvements in the entire thing, because it just sounded so good. That sound quality improvement was so spectacular.
I'm not a good judge of sound quality.
Oh, okay, fair enough. That's true. That's true. You have fair enough.
Yes, because I'm deaf in one ear. So
there it is.
That's why.
I wasn't sure if I should put it out there.
I hear everything in glorious mono.
Yeah. So the improved sound effects, the updated special effects, were glorious. And then, especially in the first film, in Episode 4, Lucas made a lot of what he considered improvements, what some fans consider not improvements, to that original film that people in our age group love so much, growing up on that VHS, right?
Yeah.
And some of those changes I want to talk about in particular. I want to talk about Mos Eisley in general.
Okay.
Did you like the changes to Mos Eisley? Did you like seeing it as a more bustling spaceport? Did you enjoy the original sort of take on it, where it was a sort of rundown kind of spaceport for, the scrum bugs of the galaxy?
My younger self, I think, would have preferred the special edition version, but I think as I've gotten older, no, I prefer the original version now. The kind of the desert shanty town,
Yeah.
like it fits the whole Western and in space aesthetic so well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the changes that I'm sort of like on the fence about. Like, I definitely appreciate what they did with that, with sort of turning Mos Eisley into sort of like the bustling spaceport that they sort of conveyed it to be.
Yeah.
And considering what we've seen from Star Wars in the intervening years, I was like, oh, it makes more sense to have it sort of be like this. But on the other side of the coin, I see exactly where you're coming from. Sort of like the more sort of Sergio Leone, desolate outpost on the edges of the frontier kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
What's that?
I can totally see that. Like, it totally makes sense to me.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of personal preference. It's not something that rubs up against me. It's just kind of, but if I watch it now, I'm like, I liked it the original way better. But it's not one of the changes they made that is horrible or greatly benefits the film either.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if ambivalent's the right word I want to use, but I watch the special editions now, and I'm like, whatever, it's fine. You got like the Ronto and the speeder, and the you can see the Outrider taking off, from Shadows of the Empire, if you remember the Outrider.
Yes, I remember that was a very big deal at the time.
For those of us who enjoyed Shadows of the Empire, at the very least.
Yeah, I think all I enjoyed at that point was the comic and watching you play the video game
on that sweet N64 we had.
Yes. Yeah.
I think you had to have like a graphics enhancement chip in your N64 to make that one work better, if memory serves. Though that might have been for GoldenEye. I can't remember now. It's all hazy.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, that was one of those changes I was like, and it was sort of like the first big change you see visually in Star Wars. I mean, up to that point, when you're watching Episode 4 in the special edition theaters, it was, they kind of cleaned it up, right?
They cleaned it up. I think there's an extra shot of the sand crawler in there.
Yeah, and you get more of the stormtroopers on dewbacks and things like that. But kind of smaller changes. That was kind of the first big one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that sort of graduates into Greedo shooting first. The most controversial...
Everyone's favorite change.
Right. And it's sort of interesting, though, because as I sort of have... Since doing the Mandovision podcast, I have been immersing myself in the Star Wars podcasting world, the Star Wars social media world. And it's been very interesting because a person of my age bracket has a very different opinion of that sequence than people whose first time experiencing Star Wars was the special editions, who thought so little of it. So it's I feel like Greedo shooting first has become like an old man, shaking his fist at the clouds kind of scenario. But that doesn't mean I like it.
Doesn't mean it's wrong either.
No, exactly. It's still the one thing I butt up against, and it's the one thing that I feel like Disney / Lucasfilm still can't get right, because they changed it only 2 years ago again for like the third or fourth time.
McClunky,
exactly. And like now that scene is just McClunky itself. It is super clunky and weird and awkward.
It's always been clunky. It looked clunky when we first saw it in 1997.
Right.
And I know that they they put out another special edition. What, like right?
It's like
right
2004, right
before?
around the DVD release, the initial DVD release, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
where they put Hayden Christensen's head on Anakin's old man body and stuff like that. Um, yeah, and I know like they tried to clean it up there, and it was like, yeah, it looks better, but it still doesn't look good. I mean, it literally looks like Harrison Ford's head pops off his body for a frame, like I don't like Terrence and Phillips style, and I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this, and again, this might be a challenging question, but for someone again of our certain age, what did that change for you as far as the way you viewed Harrison Ford, as far as you viewed Han Solo, right? Because the argument was always like, from Lucas himself was like, oh, it makes Han less of a cold-blooded character. I disagree with that. How do you feel about it?
I like his cold-bloodedness, so I just think, what's wrong with that? Why reduce it?
Simple.
Why even try?
Simple yet eloquent. I enjoy that. Yeah, I was always a fan of of Han shooting first, of Han kind of having the upper hand on Greedo, kind of like knowing that this is how it was going to end anyway. So like, let's just get to the point.
Yeah.
And I still enjoy that version of it the most. But again, I freely admit, maybe this is just something limited to those of us who grew up with it on VHS and have watched it 10 billion times.
If you want to say Greedo fired first, I mean that the idea of it. So I don't have a problem with the idea of it. It's always the execution for me,
Right.
and at least in this matter, it looks bad. It's always looked bad, and it always will look bad because the movie wasn't shot that way.
Yeah, that's not how they filmed it. I agree.
And that's why it's always going to look that way. You can replace Harrison Ford with a CG Harrison Ford so that he does move properly, and it's still not going to look right.
But you can distract the audience with Greedo yelling McClunky.
Yeah. That way the fanboys get upset even before it happens.
Yeah, for a totally different, unrelated reason.
What I think is great about it is I feel like it's kind of Lucas trolling everyone. He's like, oh yeah, you don't like that? Well, how do you like this?
It's just so weird. They keep trying to figure out ways to adjust it and make it and like justify it in new ways. I feel like it's the one thing. It's just like, you know what? You did it. Can you just leave it alone at this point?
But again, that's what, like, I feel like there is actual validity to the theory that Lucas keeps tampering with it because he knows how much people hate it.
Right, but at the same time, like, how much say does he have on things now? I mean, he sold stuff to Disney. As far as I know, he's been out since like what? Whenever that sale went through, 2012,
That's
2015.
True. That's true. That's true. I'm blaming Lucas. But yeah, maybe it was Disney. But why would Disney do that?
Because they're trying to make everybody happy. I don't know.
So okay.
I mean, Disney serves a different set of masters than Lucas ever did.
Yeah, but I just think that if Disney was going to try to make everyone happy, they would just make it the way it originally was.
Right, but at this point, I mean, again, there's like at least 2 generations now that have grown up on the special editions. Are you really making everyone happy if you're really only just making like the old farts like us happy?
Yeah, I don't know.
Most old people don't know how social media works, so we can't complain about it as easily because we don't know how to go on a TikTok video and do stuff.
You're right.
Like those young kids on the TikTok, they got way more likes than I ever get. So yeah. They're probably the audience that Disney's more worried about than me.
Probably.
That leads us to the next big change in episode 4, which is the inclusion, the reinsertion of the Jabba the Hutt scene with a CGI Jabba the Hutt replacing the fat Irish actor they had, Irish or Scottish, I can't remember. That was originally going to be in there. While they figured out how they're going to make that shot work in VXF. How does that Jabba scene play for you?
It's horrible. I think it's, like you said, you had sent me some interviews and stuff, and I mean, I think the little bit you sent me of Gary Kurtz talking about that scene, I think he's dead on with it, just being a reiteration of all the information that we got from the Greedo scene, and it's completely unnecessary, and the only reason it's there is because, one, Lucas wanting to see what he can do with the technology for the prequels, and so that I guess we can get Boba Fett into all three of the original trilogy movies.
No, I think that's a very valid argument. For me, I honestly don't mind the scene that much. I agree with everything that Gary Kurtz says, 100%. But the scene doesn't bump me the way that I know it does some folks. And again, like Gary said, it's all dialogue that we got in the Greedo exchange, and you get like that little Boba Fett bump of him kind of like looking at the camera and being like, "Hey, Boba Fett, right here, bitches. I'm right here."
Terrible.
Well, there is sort of like this weird subliminal thing going on with the special editions where it's like, hey, you know what? We're gonna give Boba Fett like an extra 10 seconds of screen time.
Yeah,
that's when people go crazy.
It made some people go crazy, that's for sure.
I mean, we'll talk about Return of the Jedi later. Don't worry.
Well, the other thing I want to say about the Jabba scene is I also think it spoils the reveal of Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi. Because we hear about Jabba the Hutt in the first two movies and we never see him, so he's this kind of looming threat. It's something that we haven't seen before, and then we see him in Return of the Jedi and it's like, what? He's this giant, gross space slug, and I think that's so great. But with it the way it is, kind of spoils that. But that being said, that's thinking about it only as Star Wars as a single trilogy, because obviously we see Jabba in The Phantom Menace. So if you're going to watch all the films, then yeah, it's already been spoiled for you, I guess.
Well, and I guess the thing that I'm okay with it about is like there's sort of a progression with Jabba and his sort of girthiness, right?
Right.
At that point in A New Hope, he's still mobile, like he's still getting around on his own power. By the time we catch up with him in Jedi, like he's kind of let himself go, if you will.
That's true.
So he's on his dais. He's not doing much. He's got slave girls dancing all around him, but he's not. He's just kind of like. He's that white guy in the club just moving his arms back and forth. He can't really do anything else. That's all he's doing.
Is that what they call living your best life?
I guess it depends who you ask. At least by Jabba standards, he is living his best life.
I think so, yeah.
And I guess if you want to sort of contextualize it with all the other canon introductions they've had, in the comic books recently, they sort of redid Shadows of the Empire with a new event called the War of the Bounty Hunters. And in that, Jabba has sort of orchestrated the death of the Hutt Council. So now he sort of like rules all the Hutts by himself.
Okay.
So you can kind of sort of see how like maybe he's like, again, like you said, living that best life and just, living it to the hilt, because there's no one keeping him in check anymore. He's like the supreme Hutt now.
Yeah.
So it does kind of work in that sense, I think.
All right.
So again, of all the scenes, that's the one I bet up against the least in A New Hope. And then the last scene from A New Hope I wanted to bring up with you, I think, is the one that no one will argue against, which is the enhancements, the VFX used, the CGI to make the battle on the Death Star just that much better.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't argue against those improvements.
No, you can't. It makes the scene a lot more exciting, and I think losing the right words here, but appropriate. It looks like a proper space battle. The only I guess the only criticism of it might be is that they could have gone even farther and had even more spaceships.
Sure, but they're still trying to hold true to the film itself. But the fact that they were able to kind of like take the original battle, enhance it visually and graphically, but also kind of speed things up. So look at those X-wings were really moving; those TIE fighters were really moving across the screen. Was one of my favorite added elements to that thing, to that sequence, I should say. So I did really take some joy in that climactic third act of A New Hope, and yeah, I don't know. Like so I have in my possession the DVD releases from, like, I think it was 2006, maybe 2007. That was like the newest version of the special editions, but they also came with a second bonus disc that was like the unaltered, uncleaned up versions of the original films for New Hope and Empire and Jedi. And they are like one of my most prized possessions because like they're the only officially released DVD copies of the old trilogy.
Right.
It's a strong word, but the third act of the original movie is almost unwatchable now compared to what they did in the special edition, I think.
I disagree with that. I think you.
I mean, you can watch it, but it's just so slow, man, compared to what they did.
You're not wrong about that, but I think it's how do I say it? You have to understand when the film was made and what the technology was, and put it in that context and understand that, like, yeah, it's slow compared to what came later. But I mean, this is the movie that made all that technology come later.
1,000% agree with you. I completely understand. I'm really just talking as like an audience member, right? Like that's why I have the Kurtz interview in there with the Lucas interview, like, because Kurtz, when I'm at my most practical, I'm Gary Kurtz. So I totally understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying, as an audience member, like, I want that special edition version. I'm like, that one's pretty gold.
Yeah, and I mean, even Gary Kurtz said he didn't have a problem with adjusting the Battle of Yavin.
Yeah, because you're not messing with the story, and that's always sort of been what I'm most sacrosanct about. You know, as much as I enjoy the Jabba scene, but I cop to everything that Gary Kurtz says. Like, it's redundant information. We got it all from the Greedo scene.
Yeah, and so with the original Battle of Yavin, it's like, yeah, the newer version is better, but I still like watching the old version as well, and watching the kind of raw filmmaking of it. And maybe it's also because I'm a fan of THX 1138, and there are some similarities between how that was shot and the Death Star run. So,
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like you said, I mean, it's still very impressive filmmaking for its time. I mean, like, they were doing things that nobody else was doing. They were using models in ways no one else was using. The camera work, the micro cameras, the smaller ones they were using to, like, run across the Death Star trenches. I mean, that stuff's off the charts.
Yeah,
you know, they were pioneering stuff. They didn't have any idea. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So, I think by and large, it's fair to say that A New Hope was the one that was most dramatically changed. But for you and I, who had never seen A New Hope in cinemas, I mean, that was an amazing experience, and I really don't hold any ill will to the special editions at all. Like, yeah, there's a couple things I don't like in each one, but by and large, I still like them. Right? Do you feel the same?
No, they're great. You know, I don't. Yeah, I don't really have a problem with them. Like you said, there may be some things I don't like that are maybe kind of nitpicky or whatever, but
yeah, like, another thing, you know, we didn't mention it, but the sequence in the Death Star where Han's chasing after the stormtroopers, and they and they altered that where he enters like a cargo bay or whatever, and there's like 100 stormtroopers in there. Like, that's a good improvement. Like, that's all stuff that works.
I actually will say, because I watched A New Hope not that long ago, and I will say, when I saw that shot again, I was like, oh, that didn't look good.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like, oh, that looks bad.
Well, I can't talk about that.
That
I
that
can't
looks
say
like
for sure.
something. I was like, that looks like something they added in after the fact.
Well, they did, just for the record.
Exactly.
Okay, so a month or two goes by, month or so, month and a half, whatever it is, goes by, and Empire comes out as a special edition. And I feel like in Empire, the biggest changes were the Wampa and Bespin, right? Going to Cloud City.
Yeah.
What did you think of the changes with the Wampa? You got to see more of the Wampa early on. There's a little bit less of the sort of like Jaws, you only see a little bit of it or only flashes of it. This time you see the Wampa right out from the beginning.
Yeah.
How'd you feel?
I love seeing it. I love that it's mowing down on a tauntaun beef bone.
Yeah, buddy.
But yeah, I think it kind of kills the suspense.
I think you're right. I think it looks really good, but I sort
Yeah.
of like that dramatic tension of like, oh, here's this lumbering beast that we haven't quite seen all of just like in flashes,
Yeah.
you know. But again, it's not one that I bump up against. It's like it's fine, okay, cool. You want to do that version of it? All right, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
And then with Cloud City, these are changes that again, I hate to kind of keep referring back to it, but the Kurtz interview we included in the podcast, where he talks about like, oh yeah, you're just gonna remove walls and then put like some CGI background so you see more of Bespin. Great, looks good. I was okay with all of it.
I agree with the idea of it, but I think a lot of it doesn't look that good, especially the um I think there's one where it's like the added windows are on the right side of the frame, and Princess Leia is running and shooting, and so's Lando. I don't know. It's like it doesn't look good. So I mean, I think in some places it's fine, but in other places it still needs to be kind of cleaned up a little bit.
So when you're watching these, are you watching them on Disney Plus or are you watching them on something else?
Disney Plus.
Oh, okay. Because I feel like on Disney Plus they've looked pretty good, but maybe it's just me.
It still looks wonky to me, and like like I said, I agree with the idea of it's a city in the clouds. We want to open it up, because when I do go back to the original Empire Strikes Back and see those scenes, it does feel a little claustrophobic. But that said, it probably wouldn't feel that claustrophobic if we hadn't seen the special editions. So I'm not sure how. I feel like the Empire Special Edition kind of is the most pointless of all three.
I think that's fair because it's the one it's the least altered.
Yeah.
And that sort of supports my argument that it's the closest of the original trilogy to like being perfect.
Right.
But that's just me, and I'm a slave to Empire. I love that movie so dearly.
Well, and I think that's the problem, though, is that Empire Strikes Back is a perfect movie. So what are you making any changes to it for in the first place? But kind of like what Gary Kurtz said, you can't re-release these movies without promising something new.
Yeah, and again with Empire, you really don't get that much new, right? I mean, again, the cleaning up of the film, like the updated VFX, the updated sound effects, putting in THX, the movie sounds and looks better than it ever has, and that's important. Like restoring these movies is an important aspect of their legacy, right? You want to preserve these for future generations. So yeah, clean them up, upgrade them, upscale them into like whatever the newest format is, so that people can continue to respect them for what they are instead of being like, something that's just kind of like fallen by the wayside, like so many older movies have. So the special editions were a really big deal, and I will talk about one negative element to Empire. In the initial special edition, but has since been removed. And I think you probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Luke Skywalker as he elects not to join Darth Vader and it chooses to sacrifice himself by jumping off that sort of balcony, patio, ledge. I don't know.
Balcony, yeah. What was that, like a reactor or something? I
Yeah,
don't
he's
even
only
know what that was supposed to
that
be.
little outpost thing jutting out in
Yeah.
the middle of nothing. And rather than take Vader's offer to join him to rule the galaxy as father and son, he self-sacrifices and jumps down the chasm, right?
Right.
So they added in a yell, which
Yeah.
which I have read is a modulated version of Palpatine's yell from Return of the Jedi. So it's not even Mark Hamill.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they took Palpatine's yell, modulated it, and made it Luke's yell. And I'm like, wait a second, that sort of like undermines the self-sacrifice part of he's screaming on his way to his demise or his seeming
Right.
demise. But they have removed that since, so I don't even have an argument about that anymore. But
Yeah.
it was at the time a little jarring when I saw it back in like '97.
Yeah, it wasn't a good choice, and it didn't sound good either.
No, it sure didn't. And then the other little change they made was an Empire. They again, one of these weird promises that we read about in like Star Wars Insider or in like one of our magazines that we subscribed to at the time, like Wizard or Hero or whatever. With like, oh, the Empire Strikes Back special edition is going to have more Darth Vader in it, and it was like weird things like him telling like some Imperial guy like, hey, prepare my shuttle. I'm going back to my ship, yo. Get ready. And then it's like a cut scene, like a deleted scene from Jedi that they interpose into it. And I go, what? That's Admiral Jezerod. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's not Admiral Piet. I know what's going on.
Right. Yeah, they changed what was the line when he's leaving Cloud City. It used to be that he just said, "Bring me my shuttle."
Bring me my shuttle. Yeah. And they
And
changed
now
it.
he says, "Alert my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival."
Right.
And it's this it just doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound like James Earl Jones. It's just extra metallic. They just kind of.
And it's sort of needless. It doesn't really serve any purpose. Like
No,
absolutely. Again, like the Boba Fett in A New Hope, it's like you're giving Vader like 3 or 4 extra seconds of screen time. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like you're not providing new context for this character. Who gives a shit? Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Damn it. I don't curse in this podcast, Mark. That was your fault.
Oh, okay. I'll take it.
All right, well, let's get to Return of the Jedi because I think that one is the next one that had some more serious quote-unquote improvements / modifications to it. And a lot of it has to do with the opening sequence, right? Like at Tatooine at Jabba's palace.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the inclusion of a musical number, the Jedi Rocks song.
Let's not. Let's pretend that doesn't exist.
I'm with you. I'm not a fan of this sequence of this inclusion. I like the original, Max Rebo and his band and Cy Snoodles, the original song whose name is eluding me at the moment. But they replaced it with this kind of like big sort of musical number in the middle. Well, not the middle, but like towards the beginning of Return of the Jedi. That to me still feels out of place.
It's very out of place, and I think I remember seeing interviews with George Lucas saying he's like, I just thought it'd be funny to kind of do a little musical number in a Star Wars film. And it's like, yeah, great thinking, jackass.
Wow, strong words for George Lucas, for the creator himself.
I love George Lucas, but I think over the last 25 years he hasn't shown the best judgment.
Yeah, it's not my favorite sequence. I still enjoy the original one. And maybe that's because I have sort of this I just have massive appreciation for Jim Henson and all the puppet work that went into the movies. So what they did in '83 for Jedi, I think was so good and so impressive. And then to kind of like be like, you know what? We're just going to replace it all with CGI now. And I was like, oh, that's not as cool.
you know, the thing is like it just detracts from the story. There's no purpose to it. Like, this is supposed to be, you know, some dirty lounge somewhere, and this is just the music playing in the background.
Right.
You don't need to call any more attention to it than you do with like the few shots of the guy on the blue guy on the piano and
Max
the
Rebo,
Max Rebo and it's Cy, right?
Sice
Cy
Noodles
Noodles.
is the singer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like you don't need any more than that. It's just a distraction.
Yeah, it's not my favorite thing, but as I've kind of gotten older and I end up watching the special editions either on TV or on Disney Plus or whatever, I'm not as adamant against it as I used to be, and I've talked to enough younger people, like I said, who grew up with the special editions as their trilogy, and they're like, oh no, I love that, that's great. I'm like, okay, well I'm not going to begrudge you that, you know. I was like, I like my version, you can like your version. I got no problem with that. That's cool.
I guess.
I work with a lot of younger people, so I have to have these interactions and be like, I'm not going to detract from anyone's Star Wars enjoyment by being like, oh, my version is better than your version.
No, and yeah, I mean, you don't even have to be younger, but you know, I have a friend who, I mean, he's a little bit younger than me, but not much, only a couple of years younger. You know, his first experience with Star Wars, he had never seen it until he went to see the special editions in theaters. So that's what he knows. And so when I've shown him the originals, he's just kind of like, "Wait, what's this?"
I get it. I get it. I totally get it. And then throughout that sequence, much like in A New Hope, this is where they decided they're going to add more Boba Fett footage, right? Like, hey, we're going to get Boba Fett more screen time.
Yeah.
That, like at the time, I was like, hey, more Boba Fett, that's cool. But like, I don't know what he's doing. Like, there's no context or anything.
Well, look, there's one shot of him that is completely useless, and it's him walking in front of the camera for like no reason. It's during that musical number. But I am a fan of the shot of him hitting on the ladies. I am okay with that. You can leave that in all day.
No, again, I'm not gonna knock any of it. I mean, like, I'm just like, I don't know what this really serves. Like, what does this really say about Boba Fett? But it's there. It exists. I guess we'll go with it. Like, why not, right?
Yeah.
From here, we go to the next biggest change. Again, we're still on Tatooine. We're still in the opening of this movie. But I am, of course, referring to the changes made to the Sarlacc pit.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, if I can remember back to 97, which, again, is very challenging, I think initially I was like, oh, I don't know if I like the changes to the Sarlacc pit. But I think over time, I grew to really appreciate and respect what they did because it made the Sarlacc pit much more of a living, functional organism. I don't know how you feel about it. So why don't you tell me?
I mean, I'm a little indifferent to it. The beak still doesn't look that good to me to kind of justify it. If they could make it a little more photo real, then I'd be with them 100%. But yeah, I mean, it makes it more of a character in the scene. So I agree with that.
Yeah, much more of a participant, making things happen, not just like an empty pit that people are falling into.
Right. And yeah, so I'm either way on that one. That it's a change that doesn't bother me that much.
It's one of the changes that for me, again, as an older fan, like that actually grew on me over time. I was like, oh, you know what? The more I see this, the more I like it. And the way the way Star Wars media has kind of incorporated that version of the Sarlacc into other things, into other properties, I think it's worked out really, really well. I know you don't play video games anymore, but they did a great Sarlacc in the Fallen Order video game. That was glorious to behold on the screen. I was like, oh my god, that's so impressive. So I went along for the ride, and I've come around on that one.
Yeah. Have they flashbacked on Book of Boba Fett to Boba Fett blasting out of the Sarlacc or anything?
They have.
All right.
I've been encouraging you to watch it, but you haven't done it yet.
It doesn't look good.
That's for a different podcast. We'll talk later. No, I definitely, I encourage you to watch it, but you know, you know me, I'm in the bag for this stuff. You know me.
I will eventually cave in and give it a whirl.
Give it a whirl. Be Kevin McAllister with the macaroni and cheese, the frozen macaroni and cheese. Just give it a whirl.
I will do.
That's a Home Alone reference.
Was it?
Yeah, indeed it was.
Okay, I wasn't sure with the Kevin McAllister and all.
I think for the final change I wanted to bring up for the special editions is the tail end of Return of the Jedi, or the very end of Return of the Jedi. We get many changes, especially and changes that have been altered more and more over the years. Initially in '97, we got they removed the Ewoks Celebration Yub Nub theme.
How dare they?
I know I think it was I think for a John Williams score, a piece called "Celebration of Peace," I think is the name of it.
Sure.
And in that we cut to different places in the galaxy. We cut back to Tatooine. We cut back to Bespin, and then for the first time we cut to Coruscant, which was going to be a central location for the prequel. So the first time we see the Imperial Center, we see statues of Palpatine being toppled.
Which I spoke to many people who they were not familiar with Coruscant. They had no idea what Coruscant was, and they just thought that was New York.
Wait, what? I don't even know what to say to that. Holy smokes.
That they were just like, what is that? It's a big city. It looks like New York. So I think for a lot of people, they were just like, what's this?
Again, I mean, we talked about it. Lucas talks about it. He's testing this technology for the prequels, and I guess by this point, he had sort of ceded to the expanded universe that Coruscant was Imperial Center, and like I got to roll with this. Let's make it happen on the screen, and I think he was testing it. But yeah, I think if you're not in the know, then you didn't know. But I've never heard it compared to New York.
I mean, why not? I mean, Coruscant very much is. It's just city stacked upon city. So, I mean, especially if you're an American, that, you're going to think of New York City when you see something like that.
I suppose. I just, the idea that people are like, oh, hey, it's New York and Star Wars. Cool.
I don't think they act. I don't want to. I don't think they actually thought it was New York, but they were just like, oh, it looks like New York. Like, I don't know what this is. This just looks like a big city. What does that mean to me?
Well, and then it was later changed again in I think 2004 for the DVD release. They incorporated Naboo into that sequence.
Yes.
We saw Gungans and the Naboo celebrating.
That's who everyone wants to check in on.
Yeah, and then you get like the biggest change to the end, and other than Yub Nub, which don't get me wrong, I love me some Yub Nub, okay? Because that one stings to this day. Not having Yub Nub at the end.
Yeah.
Which I get I understand. Yub Nub is very Ewok centric, right? Like you're celebrating on Endor, so you have this kind of like Ewokian sort of theme, right? This Ewok celebration music, and when you change that you're going to check in on all these different all these different locations throughout the Star Wars galaxy, you would change the thing to be more galactic in a sense, I suppose. So I get it. I do understand. I just have an affinity for Yub Nub.
The Ewok theme can serve as that for the entire galaxy. And
they owe the Ewoks, right? So.
And the Ewoks did what they couldn't do, so screw them.
Yeah, so bend the knee to the Ewoks.
That's right.
Yeah. And then, as I was initially alluding to, the next big change came in 2004 when Sebastian Shaw, Anakin Skywalker, old man Anakin Skywalker, was replaced by an out-of-eye line version of Hayden Christensen. as the ghost of Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
I feel like they've modified it a few more times since then, because when I watched it most recently, I was like, it looks better than I recall it looking back then when I first saw it. But it's still a little jarring. I'm just so used to seeing Sebastian Shaw as Anakin Skywalker, old man Anakin.
Well, and as we should. Like it's not like they put Ewan McGregor on Obi-Wan.
Well, no, he as a Jedi, he died as Alec Guinness, right? But I guess
sure, but was Vader not a Jedi when he died? He killed the Emperor. He saved his son. He turned to the good side.
According to George Lucas, that is false. That he died when he was Anakin Skywalker on the shores of Mustafar.
Then who? I'm sorry, I'm about to swear. Who threw the Emperor over the bridge?
Some robot man.
Okay. Some robot man with no, that's one of those moronic things that George Lucas says that makes you realize the man has no idea what he's doing.
I sort of understand everything. I wouldn't use that exact wording.
No, me neither. That's extreme. Sorry.
But yeah, I mean, it seems sort of, I don't know, uncool to remove Sebastian Shaw. From that. But I also feel like there's also sort of like the disconnect because, the Star Wars timeline in 83 to what it became in 99 when Phantom Menace came out changed a lot. There was talk that initially the Clone Wars were going to be when Obi-Wan and Anakin were young, and then the Fall of the Republic happened when they were older.
Sure.
And then things changed. Lucas changed the story up, so it is much more like the Fall of the Republic and the Clone Wars are all at the same time. It's only 20 years from that to that. So having Sebastian Shaw be Luke's dad doesn't really jive. And I mean, technically, Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan doesn't really jive anymore either.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the thing.
I understand, and maybe they'll go back now and change it to Ewan McGregor's face on the ghost body. But I mean, I don't know. I'm not in charge of that. That's not up for me to decide.
Only if you can have the sweet mullet haircut from Attack of the Clones.
How dare you? How dare you? The man looked dang good in episode 3, okay?
I think he looked awesome in episode 2, and he had a mullet.
You just love a good mullet. That's all.
How do you pull that off?
Well, as far as the big changes, and again, I'm not going to underlie. I don't want to dismiss it. I love Yub Nub, and sad that it's gone.
Yes, me too.
And if memory serves, last year when we did Ewoks Battle for Endor, no, not Battle for Endor, the first one, Ewok Adventure, I included Yub Nub in our closing number, so because that's how much I love it.
Yes. I will also. Well, have you heard Hayden Christensen talk about this? Him being superimposed over Sebastian Shaw?
No, I haven't.
So,
or if I have, I forgot.
He's aware of all the criticism of Hayden Christensen.
Sure.
But he's also aware of the criticism about this particular scene, and he has said that when that was filmed, he had no idea what was happening. That George Lucas just took him into a room with a camera and said, "Okay, now just stand there and look at the camera and whatever." And Christensen was trying to get direction out of him because he had no idea what he was doing or what it was for. And so that's probably why the eye line is off.
Yeah.
And so again, just give George Lucas, give the guy some direction and
faster, more intense.
Yeah, these are just simple fixes.
Hey, I can't argue. But I mean, he made a legacy that you and I are still talking about to this day. So who am I? And I love the movies. I don't care. Even when Star Wars isn't great, I still love it. I'm never gonna break up with it.
Well, that's one of us.
Oh, well, we can get.
Oh,
I know you are referring to the sequel trilogy, and we can have that discussion another day, sir.
no, I'm not saying I've broken up with Star Wars. I'm just more critical and honest with myself about it. And you don't have to watch everything. You don't have to read everything.
How dare you? I think it's fair to say, and I think we agree, and by all means, if we don't, please feel free to speak up. But the special editions were a pretty big landmark. I mean, for you and I, people of our age bracket who grew up watching these movies on VHS and on TV whenever they were on, which back in the day wasn't often. Getting to see them in theaters was insanely special. It was insanely fun. I think we all went multiple times to each one.
Yeah.
And had a blast every time we did it. And then we started getting the prequels. And again, we can have the discussion about the prequels another day. I've grown to appreciate them a lot over the years. I know I had someone, and I think for a long time I was like the prequel apologist, and then everyone finally caught up to me, which was nice.
I've kind of been full circle on it. I was an apologist, and then I hated them, and well, I guess not full circle, because apologist to hating them to just kind of being indifferent. And they're not good movies, but as I've said, I think on this podcast, I think they have good ideas behind them, and I can appreciate them for what they are, and the fact that I think they are pretty original. They don't, it's not like the same thing but different.
Right.
They feel like their own original thing.
Well, and I think the thing I've come around on it's probably getting older and maturing, hopefully. Recognizing the fact that like for every person, like each Star Wars, whether it's the special editions or the prequels, those might have been someone's first time seeing it, and that might have got them into the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna diminish someone's experience. It's like, hey man, you're here. Welcome to the party. Like, I'll have a good time. So I like I said, I've come around all the way on the well. Again, like you said, I think I misspoke a little bit because I've always been the prequel apologist. So, but now I don't even have to apologize anymore because there's enough people, they're just younger than me, who love these movies.
Yeah. And
it's the same thing with the special editions. The special editions have so many younger fans who that was their first time seeing Star Wars in any kind of context.
Right.
And so again, this conversation that you and I are having might be geared to a certain audience, but I think I think we're being cool about it, right? Like we acknowledge, like, hey, we're old guys. We're just talking about Star Wars. It's all good.
I mean, look, I don't know about your use of the term "old guys," but I'm completely fine with the special editions. I'm not one of those people who rails on the internet.
No, they're fun.
So.
They're fun, and like even the things I bump up against, like they don't annoy me nearly as much as they used to. So I just have a good time watching all of them, and it's great that so many people like this is their Star Wars. I'm okay with that, and I have my Star Wars, and it's all good.
It also doesn't hurt that they're the only version you can really watch if you want to watch a nice looking version of Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean you can. Like, I mean, there's fans out there that have taken versions of the other ones and they've cleaned them up on their own and they've restored them on their own and then they sell them on the internet or whatever like that. But I mean, if you want to go to those links to find like a bootleg copy of the old cuts, you can. Like they exist. But that's up to you. That's your call. That's okay. Yeah. And I support the fans who are that adamant about their version of Star Wars. But I think you got to be appreciative that the party's gotten a lot bigger and a lot more diverse with the amount of new people who've come on board because of special editions and because of the prequels. And in 10, 15 years, the sequel trilogy is going to have spawned another generation of fans too. And like, again, you and I have our opinions about the sequel trilogy. But there's a whole generation coming up who loved them. So there it is.
Those people need to be banned. They're not allowed in the club. We're going to hang a little sign on the door.
All right. Well, let's wrap this thing up, Mark. This is the Mandovision podcast. This is our special Star Wars Podcast Day episode. We thank you so much for tuning in and listening to it. I want to thank my brother Mark for hanging out and chatting with us. This is usually a one-man operation on Mandovision, but I appreciate Mark coming on 2 years in a row now for Podcast Day. It's been a lot of fun. And any closing thoughts you got, Mark?
No.
Okay. Well, you can find, if you're on social media, Mando_Vision, Twitter, Instagram, email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. If you want to be a Mandovision maniac, head over to patreon.com. You can sign up. There's all kinds of cool people over there getting sweet bonus content. It's, patreon.com/Mandovision. Head on over, check it out. And Mark, you know this, the podcast can only end one way. Which way is that? Now you're blowing it, Mark.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
This is the way.
Oh. Got it.
Oh my God.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.